Greetings and welcome to The Thirsty Mage, the podcast on the cusp of being glued to their PS5s for the foreseeable future. I'm your host and the man who wishes to be the dominant of the Tonberry icon, David Lloyd. In this episode, we are excited to talk about the recently released demo of Final Fantasy XVI. The PlayStation 5 exclusive is only a week away as of this recording, and this is shaping up to be one of the longest weeks of my life now that I played the demo. The hype is real and my patience is thin, so I'm hoping for a quick week to come by. And joining me for this episode, not only counting down the days to play the full version of Final Fantasy XVI, but also to marvel at her Phoenix versus Ifrit statue. It's Paige Chamberlain.
I don't know if I want that statue anymore.
Oh,
I'm like, after playing the demo, that's kind of a mean thing to have as the statue.
I was gonna say it has a whole different meaning now that we've actually played the demo. It's has more emotional attachment to it. Good or bad, I guess.
I also haven't told someone that that's the version I've pre-ordered, so I don't know
what
his reaction's gonna be.
Well, I hope he doesn't listen to our episodes, or at least just don't let him know that it's posted until after the package arrives. I guess. Yeah. And also joining us to discuss the newest mainline Final Fantasy game is JRPG historian and author of a very relevant book to our topic, Fight Magic Items. It's Aidan Moher.
Hello, thanks for having me back again. I am very excited to talk about this demo in this game.
Yeah, I think it's perfect. We have Aidan and I are kind of like older NES grew up with the originals through all the end, and then Paige represents the youth portion of it with her first mainline Final Fantasy was 14, so she got all of Final Fantasy all in one shot in the package that is 14. So it was funny. Before we were recording, we were just talking about how the Dragoon in the demo, who it represents, and we got two totally different answers initially, so it was fun. It's going to be a fun episode, I think.
Yeah, they're really trying to push because Yoshi P is the producer, right? And they're even so, which means he's technically not as involved in the project as like maybe some of the other people working on it, but like he's the front line in all the interviews and stuff. Because obviously he's got his popularity from 14, so it's very. A lot of people making jokes about the pre-orders not being as good as they're expecting because at the moment it's PS5 exclusive, and it's like because all the people that play 14 are on computer.
PC.
Yeah, most of them.
Well, at this point there's so many 14 players that they pretty much only need like I don't know, a quarter of the Final Fantasy 14 subscribers to buy this game for it to be a smashing success. Like.
Yeah, though there's a joke that like all the money from Final Fantasy 14 keeps funding these other games, and they're like, can't it just fund 14?
Yeah.
I feel though like, they've made the complete opposite game of Final Fantasy 14. So like trying to appeal to that audience with Yoshi P is great, but like, I don't know, it's like there's a lot of buttons to click and icons to press on in 14, and 16 obviously takes a totally different direction. So I'll be really interested to see if there is a big crossover audience with something like 14. Or like, fans of the older games.
Yeah, they might have to. If things are dire, they could always offer Final Fantasy 16, where you get like 20 hours free up to like the second chapter, and download your free copy.
Well, if we listen to Twitter, then are they going to have to update with the turn-based mode because it's been. How long? And people still expect the next Final Fantasy to be turn-based.
Well, I had a good laugh to myself because I remember when Final Fantasy VII Remake came out and everyone was screaming to high heavens that it was blasphemous, that it wasn't like a full turn-based, like traditional RPG. And now like the turn-based RPG proponents are using Final Fantasy VII Remake as they're like, well, it should be like this. And it's like, hey, wait a minute.
Not to go too off topic, but I am interested in Ever Crisis, which got delayed, because to me that's sort of like the alternate remake where it's, they're using the what's the first 7 remake called? Is it Rebirth or is that the new one?
Rebirth is the new one. Like,
yeah. Well, they're
Yeah.
using like those graphics for the battle, so then it's like the original game where like the in-battle graphics are better, but then it's got the mobile look for the walking around. But I know that got delayed a heap. But I've heard that it's actually no longer episodic like it was planned to be, so you're going to get like the full of the base story and a couple of the other games straight up.
I hadn't
Oh.
heard that because the
No,
episodic
I
thing
didn't
was
either.
turning me off.
Yeah.
Big
It's
time.
still
I
gonna
mean,
be definitely punchy.
it being on mobile is turning me off, but
Yeah. But
I'm glad to hear that you're going to get the whole shebang. I'm really curious to see how that is because I think that's what I wanted before
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII Remake came out. Like, I just wanted something that was like, more accessible, modern quality of life stuff, like update the sort of like chibi graphics to be, like more modern, but retain
Yeah.
that feel like in the pre-rendered backgrounds and stuff.
Yeah, because it's like Final Fantasy Remake is sort of this alternate thing, and then Ever Crisis seems to be what like a more straight remake would be, except with some Gutch elements and short hair Sephiroth if you want some customization.
Well, if we're talking blasphemous, short-haired Sephiroth is as blasphemous as I can think for Final Fantasy VII. You can't take those locks away from him. It's the source of his power.
Makes me wonder how drastically like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is going to take that remake series off the track laid by the original game. Like, I feel like, why would you remake a classic game twice in two different styles? I have like a again, not to get us too far off topic, but I have a pet theory that the remake trilogy with Remake and Rebirth and whatever the third one's going to be called is going to end at the City of the Ancients, where there's that big scene that everybody knows from Final Fantasy VII. And I feel like that's what they're leading to, and that's going to be like the pivot point where everything sort of changes. I don't think they're going to try to remake the entire back half of Final Fantasy VII in the same style. I think we're going to see a major sort of shift in where the story goes after this, and then they can be like, oh, but if you're mad about that, here's Ever Crisis. It's like a comprehensive modern remake in the style you're looking for. It has the same story. It's like exactly what you need. Go play that.
Yeah.
I know some people got confused by why Crisis Core was like the same and nothing connected to the remakes.
There's only so many devs at Square. They have to pick and choose.
The amount of games they released last year.
No, that's true. The only thing I want to make sure is that that the Cid in Remake will look like he's 60, but will still be numbered as a 35-year-old man.
As a 39-year-old man, I play some of these old JRPGs and I feel old. I feel used up. I feel like I should be far wiser. Like Citan and Xenogears and Oron and in Final Fantasy X, and I'm like older than them now somehow, but far less developed. I feel like, well, Sid's lived a few lives, but I feel like I'm in a better place than Sid Highwind, at least.
I know there's some games where like there's one game I didn't really play it, but like one of the Romancing Saga games came out in English for the first time, and there was a character that was my age at the time, and I'm like, whoa, a character in their 20s in one of these games? Because like there's so many where they're teenagers, or maybe like 40s or something. There's not really like the beginning
the grizzled 20-year-old veteran. Seen too much in their life.
I feel like like developers or the people creating these games, they'd like Google, they'd be like, okay, what was the average life expectancy in the Middle Ages? And average life expectancy would be 38 or whatever. Then they'd be like, oh, okay, so my old characters have to be 32. They're almost dead. Like, without recognizing that like average life expectancy is affected by like infant mortality and childhood mortality rates significantly. Like, it's like, that kind of like that 101 lesson about life expectancy. So they they just did a quick Google and they're like, okay, so people who die by the age of 38, I should make, my wizened old man 32. And there we go.
My favorite is like anime and games, and you look up the stats for their measurements and their weight, and you're like, this does not add up. You just made it up. Oh, there was one character in Fire Emblem Engaged, and she was like wrinkled and grey hair, and I think she was only like 30-ish, less than.
we could talk about the life expectancy of JRPG characters all day long, but it's probably a good time to pop into the topic of the night, which is the Final Fantasy XVI demo. So we'll start off with our initial impressions. I would say initially we were all surprised that this came out 2 weeks before the release of the game. I
was
think a
expecting
lot
it
of people.
sooner.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. I was expecting a little bit closer, but why don't you kick us off, Paige, with what you thought of your experience with the demo?
Don't play this game in front of your kids.
Yes, that's. I can also, as a father of a 12 and 10-year-old.
I think we already knew from the other
yes.
trailers that there was going to be blood and some other things.
I'm glad I was wearing my headset when I played because I had just turned it on and my kids were behind me and Benedicta was chasing down the Titan Man, and there was a couple words that she said that I don't think my wife would have been too happy with the kids hearing. But,
keep losing my track of thought. But yeah, we knew that sort of approach was going to be, and yet my husband had beaten the demo before me, and he was saying like, "Oh, there's a bunch of swearing, but it's not as like out of place as it felt in like the Castlevania Netflix series. Like it just felt like they were swearing when it was made sense to." And then I played it, and there's a bit where one guy's just repeatedly like saying shit before he gets like badly hurt. To me, because I swear a lot, but it didn't stick out to me really because it was just appropriate.
I was still waiting for a bollocks.
Most of the so far the adult stuff didn't be too much. Although I thought the animations sometimes are a bit funny. Like she's getting twirled around, and then it like part of it seemed doing this before they kiss. It seemed a bit weird and stiff. So, just because like the rest of the game looks so good, some of the other animations aren't as great. But yeah, my initial impressions are I can't believe that the start of a game in a AAA JRPG is so much cutscene.
Yeah, it was pretty heavy.
Yeah, like it's what you'd expect, but it was just like of course. And then the tutorials like every 3 seconds. I would say, my only thing was that the enemies seemed a little HP spongy and the fights went on a bit long.
Okay.
Like they just felt
in the initial demo or in the iconic challenge?
In the initial one, I didn't really touch much of the iconic one.
Oh, okay.
I played in story mode. Well, it doesn't. Fast.
It doesn't. No, I just played on the normal mode or whatever. Because he told me about those items, and I was like, wow, they just sound like full on cheat mode. But yeah, in the what I was playing, the fights seemed like they kind of went on longer than initially needed to, because it's like I wasn't even taking that much damage necessarily, but it was just like the stagger system, I think, because like that's when I want to use a certain attack, so it's like that probably.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be important. I think that stagger.
But yeah, I don't think it's not changed my opinion one way or the other. I think because I'm mostly looking forward to seeing how the story develops, actually, like what the bearers are and stuff. Because from the first trailer, I was very interested in the like him being like heck the crystals, and I'm like because like my experience of Final Fantasy is sometimes more of a spin-offs, and not as many games do it as much as I think, but like some of them do have like someone sacrificing themselves for the sake of a crystal thing. So it's interesting, having this pro tag that's like, to heck with all this stuff.
Yeah.
So like, that's what I want to see more of.
Yeah, well, it's very, it's one of those Final Fantasy 14 things where it's, if you started off in like the first games, the crystals were always the good thing, the thing that was like protecting us from evil, and we had to either save them or get them back or whatever. Like you had to, they were the keys to peace or whatever. And now they're kind of flipping the script, and very much so like in Final Fantasy 14, where like the Eidolons or icons, like they're the bad guys in Final Fantasy 14, where again it'll be interesting to see if they have personalities in Final Fantasy 16. Because it seems like they're being controlled by the dominant, but obviously, like, well, Ifrit, we'll get into that later. But
I think Ifrit was when I thought it was like, oh, they must have personality, and then I'm like, oh, maybe they, that situation is different. It was just like a weird possession thing, but
Yeah.
initially that's what made me think that they do, because like Ifrit was really going to town on Phoenix.
Yeah.
Like they
Freak was having a bad day.
I mean, how spoilery can we get? Like,
I think we can.
like,
The demo, I think we can spoiler fully, because it's only 2 hours long.
Yeah. So like, I thought that was really interesting because Joshua's voice came out, right? Like his personality, he was Phoenix, right? He was talking as Phoenix. Ifrit didn't say anything. We didn't see Ifrit's internal thoughts. And like, I feel like we're gonna find out that Clive is Ifrit's dominant. That like the fire dominant was actually passed along to him as well as Joshua, and that's why we weren't seeing, because he's not like consciously controlling Ifrit, whereas Joshua was sort of consciously controlling Phoenix. And I think there might be some sort of revelation down the line that like Clive sort of blames himself for Joshua.
Well, I think it would, but it was very interesting because like a lot of everyone's impressions from like the other trailers and stuff was that we get free, and then it seems like, oh, we kind of don't, at least not until a bit later when we it's definitely changed my expectations of what's happening in the story so far.
I think the iconic challenge was a bit of a red herring too, because they give you Phoenix, Titan, and Garuda as your dominants that you can use the abilities for. But clearly, at that point in the story, Clive wouldn't have had Garuda because Benedicta was still in possession. So it'll be interesting to see like what happens there.
There is fine print when you load up that part of the demo that says like, oh, this is like a slice from later in the game, but you might also find in the final game that you don't have the same abilities or equipment or whatever.
That's
so
why
like, there's definitely a little bit going on there that they didn't want to, show their cards too much. And so we just got to see, I think, the icons that we're already familiar with, rather than them throwing in Leviathan or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's the only one they haven't. Have they shown? I think they've shown most of them, haven't they?
Or at least clips of some, like you can definitely tell. But it's funny because you say Leviathan. There's no way there isn't one. But
that's why
I can't recall seeing a.
I don't. But like, not sure how many more they're gonna have. But that's probably the only other one. But we're interested in that because, it's not what abilities you have, but like, so what's happened to Phoenix? Because are we still going to have our Phoenix blessing if he's not around or not? So we won't know until we get the full.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's it for Joshua. Like,
I'm sorry. They showed lots of corpses, and I didn't see no charred burnt. So, and he's a Phoenix. So like that's.
Well, that's my only thing is I think he's definitely dead at that point, but there's a possibility maybe he'll come back later. But
almost certainly. Like they can't. Like this Phoenix symbology is just too strong for him not to come back. To come back later. Yeah.
How about you, Aidan? What's what were your initial impressions going through the demo?
I mean, very good. Like in many ways, it just kind of blew my expectations out of the water. And it wasn't that I was going in with low expectations, but I was, as a longtime fan who does, really like and prefer the old sort of more traditional systems in the series, turn-based combat, stuff like that. I was really kind of anxious about the idea of them going full like action combat. It's not that I don't like those games. I just beat Nier Automata. I just beat God of War 2018. I loved them, but that wasn't what I'd go to Final Fantasy for. So it was a huge relief to me to get into the game and see that this combat is not just good. It's great. Like you can see the foundations in the first story, like the prologue stuff that you play through in the demo. And then the second combat focused portion of the demo expands on that. And you're like, okay, this is they've done their homework, right? Mm-hmm. I'm working on a piece right now that's sort of like looking at and this feature will be out next week, but it's looking at the ways that Final Fantasy, like from the very beginning of its creation, it was always interested in changing and redefining itself and exploring design space. But I think when you make a change as big as what Final Fantasy XVI has done with its combat, like Square Enix called their shot. And like, if you're going to do that, you have to be best in class, right? You can't switch over to a full, like action-based combat without being as good as Bayonetta or as good as
Well,
Devil May Cry or whatever, right?
yeah, I was gonna say
And
the combat director is someone from Devil May Cry 5,
so
so
they went out and got him, and it pays off. It's like, okay, like I'm not, the combat's just so good that it's like, yeah, okay, this isn't my style of combat that I personally want to see in a Final Fantasy, but it fits within the game and it's executed so well, and the possibility for like, added complexity and customization and, incorporating the player's style and approach to combat, you can see how that can kind of blossom outward through these systems. So it's like, okay, like if you're going to call your shot, like you got to hit a home run. And I feel like Square has done that. Like I have no concerns about the combat anymore at this point. They use enough window dressing to still make it feel like Final Fantasy, right? You still get the little splash screen at the end with your experience, and you get, the little melody when you beat a boss, and it's like, yeah, okay, like
I think it's so sorry, but it's funny when you get the spoil screen and there's no spoils.
Yeah, I had a few of those where it's like,
why
here's
is it
what you've
loading?
earned, and I'm like,
Is it
did
loading
it hang
for
up?
nothing?
Yeah.
So like that part of it, like that was my biggest like concern, was like going in and like, and seeing like, does this work? Like other games and other series have made shifts in like genre or systems, and it just hasn't worked out. But here I feel like, I have no concerns at this point about the combat. I trust Yoshi P and his team, like Creative Business Unit 3, with stuff like story, graphics, art design, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like you've got something here that, in a year with Diablo 4, with Tears of the Kingdom, like this could be right there as a Game of the Year contender, which is like, those are some heavy hitters. The story and stuff, I liked it all. I thought the like main core story about like, looking at the divide and, responsibility and how nobility puts pressure on kids was really interesting. I'm always a sucker for, like complex, politically driven, war stories and fantasy. And it does all of that really well. I don't really dig the, Game of Thrones of JRPGs vibe. I didn't really like that and feel it was necessary for it to have, all the swearing or, like close-ups of people's throats being slit and blood gushing everywhere. I just, blood splattered children. Like, I just don't know that that's necessary for Final Fantasy to be able to like really achieve what it wants to achieve. Like Final Fantasy 14 has a mature, complex, interesting story that's, about, like politically driven conflict, and it doesn't have any of that. And it's not that, I'm not chaste. I'm not, like it doesn't bother me. Like I said, I just beat God of War. But what God of War does so well is it like examines, like it has that hyper violence, but it examines the cost of that hyper violence and that continued violence, how that changes Kratos, how that changes Atreus. And so it's going to take a lot for me or a lot for Final Fantasy 16 to prove that like this Final Fantasy needed that, that it needed like, the gore. And like, I'm also playing Diablo 4, and Final Fantasy 16's violence and gore is nowhere close to that level. But Final Fantasy's always been a series that's had like broad appeal across a lot of classes and a lot of different tastes and stuff like that. And I know a lot of people were turned off by, the violence in something like Game of Thrones. And I do wonder if that's going to limit its potential audience growth a little bit. So I'm very curious to see where that goes. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think that's what Final Fantasy needs to be. There's so many games that are already that I feel like, I'd like to see Final Fantasy sticking, not even sticking. I still wanted to explore like more creative space and narrative space. But sometimes in the demo for me, when you have a soldier early on running through a battlefield and there's rocks falling and he's just like blasting out the F word over and over and over again. Or like, that
Splattering.
scene with, there's, Benedicta and Hugo, like, they get kind of raunchy in the hallway. And I'm like, this kind of feels like a 17-year-old's version of what they think like mature storytelling is.
Yeah.
But like contrast that with the fact that I think that there were a lot of really interesting themes explored in the demo. Like, I think that the game does nail a lot of really kind of mature, interesting, complex ideas. And then I get taken out of it because it's like, oh yeah, by the way, like, we want you to know this is like a grown up Final Fantasy. So, you know, here are two women getting their throats slit, you know, by soldiers. And
I
I don't know,
think
like, it was so much more interesting that like Joshua's mom chose to sell Clive into slavery. Like, that was really interesting. That was really like, that's really hard. And like, you know, that's complex. The idea that she just let her two ladies maids have their throats slit, like, that made her feel cold, but what she did to Clive made her feel far, far colder. I didn't need to see her, you know, callously murder her ladies maids or whatever they were.
I think the blood stuff can be useful for knowing a character is for sure actually dead, like seeing their head roll off and stuff, because there's a lot of times in games where it's like someone's been hit, but you're like, but like, are they like, are they going to come back because you didn't show me they're dead? Yeah, the more like the relationship stuff, and so far like it hasn't been too bad, because I know like some screenshots or whatever we've seen, we're like, I hope it doesn't go into too much. Like, I think with the Benedicta and that, it was just kind of like, okay, they're in a relationship, so I know that. And then with Clive's parents, it was actually kind of funny because we got to see his dad rejecting.
I'm going to sleep.
Yeah.
That scene was great, and that was like, that was a good example of using something like sex as like a storytelling device, and it told us something about those two, right? That was a fabulous scene. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I kind of echo everyone in that the demo for me was incredible. Like I said, I didn't really have any expectations going in. Like, I always enjoy Final Fantasies. I figured I'd enjoy this one, but I wasn't expecting it to be this good. Like, it really blew me away. I think one of the big ones for me was just how much emotional like how emotional they made so many of the scenes, and like, there's obviously like the the end with Ifrit and Phoenix, like, just like you almost like the feeling of like dread or while you're watching it, and I was like, oh my god, this is going on for too long, and then it hit that point where it's like, okay, now it's like now it's really hit me. So I guess somebody nailed just how long this beating had to take. But then, yeah, just the like you said with the mother, they just kind of nailed that whole villain vibe, because I was like ready to, if my family wasn't asleep down the hall, I would have been like screaming at my TV, like, kill her. Like, I was just like, I was so, you get so mad at the decisions she was making, and you could see it coming like the entire way with like how she was acting and stuff too. But yeah, I think it just felt like the emotional moments just felt very powerful.
I think we all have kids. You know, when I was playing Final Fantasy 15 a year and a half ago or so, like, it was fine if my kids walked in while I was playing it at any given time. Like, do you feel like that emotional payoff of like, you know, being that angry at Clive and Joshua's mom? I think her name was Annabella, something like that. Like, was that worth taking in? Like, you know, the fact that like, if your kids walk in at the wrong time when you're playing Final Fantasy 16, like, you're going to have some, you know,
avert your
hard conversations after that. And I just like, you know, was that emotional payoff? Like, did you find that more than you've had with previous Final Fantasy games? Like, is that?
Well, I'm kind of with you. I didn't think it needed to be that gory. And then we don't really know how far kind of the mature content will go, I guess, until we get into the real game. But I almost wish they had, because it's funny. Before the demo came out, I was actually thinking, like, my son's 12 now. He's, you know, getting to the age where he might start enjoying these games. I was kind of looking forward to playing 16 with him, because like the action combat would, like, he might like kind of like, I don't really care about the story. Like, it's, you know, it's over my head, but he might have really got into the combat. And I'm like, well, at this point, like, you can't play this. Like,
yeah. And I think like, that's what, oh, go on.
You know,
go ahead, Paige.
Like Bayonetta 3 has the naive angel mode with the getting rid of the blood and even the cigars and stuff like that. But this is like the cutscenes and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I wish there was something like that where it's like here's a mature version, like there's a mature version of the game, and then here's
parental control.
I don't know, teen version of the game or something.
Because like, I think for me, like I discovered Final Fantasy around the age that your son is now. I think I was 11 with Final Fantasy VI, which was like, a kind of a gritty, mature game at the time, like a pretty dark game. But like the abstraction of the graphics, like the pixel art, like allowed me to sort of like engage with the violence as much as I was mature enough to, right?
Yeah.
Like if I wasn't ready for that, my brain wouldn't really take me there. Whereas there's like no avoiding it in Final Fantasy 16. And, they talk about Yoshi P. I was working on a piece and we were able to ask him some questions. And he said like, their main goal, their first baseline inspiration for this game was we want to reach more people than ever. We want to reach a new audience with Final Fantasy. And they said, Yoshi P has said in the past, like, a younger audience. But then I look at that and I'm like, well, like how is creating like a game like with the sort of vibe of a like famously adult show, Game of Thrones, really gonna achieve that? Like you bring in the action combat to get a younger audience, but like, is going after the Game of Thrones. Like we're all in our 30s now. We started watching Game of Thrones in our 20s. We're all in our 30s. And like, we're the Game of Thrones audience. I don't think Zennials are exactly like big Game of Thrones fans, are they? Like, I just see a disconnect there in terms of like how you can have accessibility and build a younger audience with a story that's like veering more towards sort of M-rated or like adult specific content. Like Game of Thrones was 12 years ago. Do people still want that?
I never even watched it at the time because I just didn't have too much interest in it. I'm thinking like that they're looking at games like God of War or The Last of Us, like Grand Theft Auto, and thinking like, this is, you can go this mature and you're going to get, and when he says young, I'm thinking like he's probably more talking about like 20s, like kid, early 20s sort of thing. Like they probably think like, oh, these people in their early 20s that didn't grow up on Final Fantasy, because he had that huge gap between, like, if you're under 30, then your only Final Fantasy might have been 15 at this point. And you've never played a turn-based Final Fantasy potentially, like if you're not like a big JRPG fan or something like that. So maybe they're looking for the action, because I mean, you hear it from publishers all the time where it's like, the new generation of they want action, like they're not interested in like the strategic combat, like that's the triangle strategies and the Octopath Travelers are more geared for late 30s early 40s kind of crowd, I think. And this is the action RPG stuff, I think, is really leaning towards that early 20. And then even like television now, when you look at like HBO shows, I know like even if Game of Thrones or whatever, you just look at any other HBO show and they're usually pretty crude, pretty vulgar. Like I'm with Paige, I kind of swear all the time too, so I hear it in the game and it doesn't affect me any, but the blood is definitely like, this isn't really Final Fantasy.
I don't mind any of that, like in games or movies or fiction. It just feels like a weird fit to me with Final Fantasy. Like to me, Final Fantasy has always been like a gateway, like super accessible version of like high fantasy or science fantasy or like epic fantasy. And so like to me that just creates this layer where like my kids are growing up and I've been having a ton of fun like introducing them to game series that I love. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess like maybe in my eldest is 8, so maybe in 8 years I'll feel comfortable watching like, but even then, like I don't want to. I don't know. It's just weird. It just feels like it's less accessible to me. They're chasing like, one audience while closing the door on a whole younger generation.
You'll have to expose them to Legend of Heroes instead.
I think
I've been playing through Trails in the Sky right now. So there you go. Yeah. Well, maybe I'm naive. Maybe kids like this. Maybe this is what teenagers are into. Maybe they love Last of Us.
The main purchasers of games and stuff are people in their 20s. So I don't really think, I don't think they think about whether people are playing this with kids in the house or anything, really. Like, if I don't even know how many of the deaf people necessarily have kids, but like, I think, that's the audience is adults. Like, that's what they made the story for.
But they specifically said like they've specifically said that their goal is to reach a younger audience, right?
Yeah,
Like,
younger than 40-year-olds.
Yeah.
yeah, but like, so okay, then they're going after 22-year-olds, you know, who are out of university, they have money because they're working their first jobs or not
Yep.
in this economy.
Yeah.
But like
They're not paying for
they were
kids.
10 when Game of Thrones came out, right? Like, and then like by the time they probably noticed it, everybody hated Game of Thrones because the last few seasons were such a, you know, were so panned. Like, I just, it's just weird to me. It's weird to be going after kids or younger people, quote unquote, a younger audience, a new audience, but like leaning on a property that I feel, you know,
It's not that far off of like the Witcher on Netflix though. Like the
Yeah.
that's a good
Henry Cavill,
that's a
like
fair
Yeah.
comparison. Yeah,
Which I
that's
had
fair.
plenty of.
Yeah,
Like the game
yeah,
itself. I
yeah.
remember I was like 12 or something, and my dad was showing me like Witcher 2, and it's like, well, look at this. When you cut at the head actually comes off. Wow. Like he was impressed like the game actually did that instead of just sort of, you know. So I guess it depends on your parents as
Oh, that's true.
well.
Well,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
funny that
I grew up on Doom. Like I was playing Doom and
yeah.
Mortal Kombat and all that kind of stuff as a kid. So like, you know, but it was all, again, like there's a layer of abstraction. And I think like the closer we get to like photorealism and hyperrealism, the more you have to like understand like how that breaks down the players like active participation in creating the game world and the game experience, which I think has been so important to Final Fantasy. But maybe that's just gone with the mainline games, right? Maybe it is just veering that way.
Right.
And like, you know, now Square Enix gives us Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy and Bravely Default and all those other games, and those fill that niche maybe that Final Fantasy used to, right, for people.
But like I said, I was comparing it to say the Castlevania Netflix series, where it felt like it was trying very hard to be adult and not very, like, it was very sweary and just all as much as they could.
Yeah.
Whereas I said most of the time, again, it would flow past, like I didn't really notice it, which means it wasn't really like out of place to me. Like people were swearing when they might actually swear and not just to be silly. And then like, yeah, there was a lot, I think in like the end of that series, they had a lot of adult scenes, some of which were relevant to the quite relevant to the plot, but they interspliced it with the climatic action segment, so I couldn't even skip past a bit, which had me really annoyed.
That's clever.
Like it was like kept cutting between like, you know, this guy's having a fight, this other thing's going on with these people, this fight. It's like I couldn't go just skip it a bit. Because like yeah, generally I don't really like having that stuff in media, but in that it was technically relevant to the story in that case because like something was happening in that scene that would have had to happen then. Meanwhile, an entire character's arc in that show seemed like completely pointless, and like he didn't need to be doing that at all. Like, but yeah, it's like they just it felt like in that they were forcing it in a bit more than it needed to be. Whereas yeah, I think for this it's fine. So long as the story is good. The story needs to be really good because they said that the story emphasis is really big, so it's got to be. Because so many game people say, "Oh, this is a good story," and then I play it. I'm like, I mean, it's a good story, but it's not a great story. Like, if this is it, like,
I was actually relieved by how much I liked the story. I think they leaned so hard in like early marketing towards like the idea that this is like an action game that like, and then they brought on the Devil May Cry guy and everybody's like, oh, is this just going to be like a Devil May Cry game? Like, you know, there's levels, you could see a map with levels and, you know, they announced like a high score feature and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, is this like, are we just going full on like character action game? And so I was kind of like, I was surprised by it. I think Paige, you were saying earlier, like you play the demo and there's a lot of story. Like there's a lot of cutscenes. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of instances where you're just like observing, just like, you know, a Japanese RPG or any RPG. And so I was relieved by how much potential I think the story has now, because I didn't know what to expect. You know, Final Fantasy 15 had like its actual story segments was very short comparatively to other games in the genre, like other RPGs. So I was like, oh, is there just going to sort of be window dressing that's going to push you from, you know, one node on the map to the next? But it seems like there's some pretty significant and substantial like narrative structure that's being set up early on.
Yeah, I think the thematic scenes will calm down as the game goes on. Like I think it was heavy for the demo because I think they're just trying to make a big first impression, knowing that, you know, the first 2 hours is what we're going to release in the demo. So let's like really put our best foot forward, sort of thing, and you know, lean into it. I think as you get further into the game, there's going to be more opportunities for like just exploration. Like you can just see from the map, it's going to be massive. So I think there's going to be a lot of like walking around and talking and stuff. So I think it'll balance out as the game goes on.
I wonder how many people are going to buy it thinking it's like like an action-y game like God of War 2018, and like maybe be turned off by how much story
Be like,
there is.
Yeah, we'll see. I want to talk a little bit about the big thematic, or the big climatic scene with the icons. But to segue into that first, I have to mention how incredible the music is, because this was something that stood out for me when I played Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah.
And you know, they're using the same composer, Masayoshi Soken. I hope I pronounced that right. And I couldn't believe how great it was. Like I was wearing headsets because I didn't as soon as the some of the word, you know, voice acting was coming out and I was seeing how mature it was, I'm like, well, I better throw the headphones on. And just being immersed in all of like not only how great the music was, but even just like the sound design and in that big scene at the end, just like how like the music just made it feel like this was like this larger than life moment. But with these battles between the two things, like the music was just incredible, and I'm so looking forward to hearing the rest of the soundtrack.
Yeah, I do miss like, you know, the older games like Uematsu style with like very like melody driven, like hummable music. But I feel like the work that Soken's done in the Final Fantasy series, like with 14 and now 15, it's just like, it's unreal. It's so good. I remember like trying to convince my dad back in the day, like he liked video games, but he'd always laugh because we'd always talk about our favorite like RPG songs or whatever, me and my brothers and my friends, and he'd laugh because they'd be chip tunes, and to him they just sound like beeps and boops, and I was like, no, like this is serious music, Dad. But like now, like being able to show him something like, you know, the music in Final Fantasy 15 like this, just like legit world class, like top tier like soundscapes, like it adds so much to the experience, and it's like so masterfully done that you just sink into it and it just like fills you, even if you know, I couldn't hum a melody from that game, but like it fills you with like every emotion that you need to go along with,
and it still feels familiar too, because they work in like classic
a lot of leitmotifs like from the Final Fantasy series throughout that like makes it feel like, you know, taking you through that kind of emotional journey with the series.
Plus now they can afford like the orchestras and stuff, so they've got the technology and the budget.
Well, that's what I always laugh at, because I work in an office and I always turn on video game music, and so my coworkers will walk in and like, you're a classical music fan. I'm like, damn straight
actually,
I am.
The classical radio station in Australia has like a request hour, so a lot of people request game music.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think like Soken is becoming just like the guy. I feel like he's setting himself apart as like one of the like iconic composers of this generation, which is great. I mean, Square Enix and Final Fantasy have fed a ton of them over the years, but he's what he's doing here and what he's done in Final Fantasy 14 is just unreal. So good.
I'm glad that he's been able to work.
Well. Yeah, because he was sick for a little bit. So
cancer.
Yeah. Hope he's healthy. All these composers, man, they always have these stories of working themselves into.
He was working on like the Enorca soundtrack, and he's like in hospital and stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
they're also young. Like he's only 48. You know, which is like, you know, not that much older than me. And, you know, he's one of those guys, he's been with Square Enix since 2001. Like he's been there for 22 years. But even though it like all of a sudden is like, he just seems to have appeared from nowhere, but he would have been how old? In like in his mid 20s when he started there.
I think he did one of the Drakengard games, and those were like forever ago. So
I'm looking at his Wikipedia
I think
page.
It's like, for some of these people, you know, their music or whatever else they're working on is their life. So when they're sick, it's like stopping's not really. It's hard to get them to stop because you're like, oh, you need to rest. But it's also like probably what helps them keep going is to keep working on their life's work.
Producing
passion.
art can be cathartic, and
Yeah. Well, I think we should end with a little bit of a discussion on the big finale of the initial scene or the initial
I
demo.
messed up. I thought you were supposed to break the fireball when you had the 4-second countdown.
Oh,
So I failed. Thankfully, there's a checkpoint pretty close to it. But
that's funny.
Yeah.
But I'll start with so when we get to the point where Joshua's about to be slaughtered by an empirical soldier, I guess. That's the way it seemed anyway. I don't know if they were really there to capture him or to kill him, but anyway, the soldier gets close and Joshua turns into the Phoenix. And that's when Clive looks up and sees a figure that says something. And I don't know what you guys thought he said, but I thought this figure said, "I found you." That's what, from my lip reading, I thought that's what he said. "I found you." And then that's when Ifrit appears.
Yeah, I think it was something like that. Yeah, the figure.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll find out.
So it'll be interesting to see what this figure ends up being.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you were saying, Aidan, I think it felt like Clive was in Ifrit, was talking to Ifrit.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think we saw Ifrit and Clive control at the same time, right? Like they were never in a shot together. We heard Clive's voiceover telling Ifrit to stop, but I don't think we actually saw them like physically. He was just found in the ruins, the rubble afterwards.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see.
And I think it was clever for Square to have us control the Phoenix in that fight.
Yeah.
Because it felt more like the feeling of helplessness. Like even when I was like attacking Ifrit and they're like, "You defeated Ifrit," and I'm like,
because he was like, "I need to help."
I'm pretty sure this isn't going to go well.
Yeah, he's completely not in control.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on.
You're controlling Phoenix instead.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know about that statue, like I said.
Oh yeah, it's got you second guessing now that you know what happened. Maybe, well, who knows? Maybe you don't know what happens in the rest of the game. Maybe, it just
it's a logo too, right? Like the Ifrit and Phoenix are the logo, which is interesting. Like you think there might be some reconciliation there at some point, maybe.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Well, and then the whole fight itself, like it was one of these. To me, Final Fantasy has always been like at the cutting edge of like whatever system it's on. Like it's always been like, if you want to see the best of what a system can do, just buy whatever Final Fantasy game came out on that system. And I feel like this is like, okay, we're really going to show you what the PS5 can do here. And that fight was like just everything that was going on with the music, with the visual effects, with just the scope, with like the icons bouncing all around, Ifrit running down. Like my mind was blown during that whole time.
Yeah, the seamlessness of it all was really impressive as well. It like brought me back to Final Fantasy VII, like the first time you had a like a cinematic that like just like went right into gameplay, or vice versa, or you're running around over top of one of the FMVs as Cloud. Like the seamlessness of how you like had what seemed like, in even last generation would have been like a pre-rendered cutscene, like a video file playing, and then all of a sudden you're just in control of these two icons. Like that was pretty impressive. I was not, before playing the demo, I didn't care about those icon battles. I was like, that just seems sort of like, like glorified quick time event cutscenes. Like I don't know, but like the spectacle of it, like you were saying, is just so high and like polished and impressive that like, it's like I didn't really know what I was doing when I was playing Phoenix. I was like, it felt like a weird Panzer Dragoon like ripoff.
Mash that button, shoot him.
But like it just looked so good. It was choreographed so well. I was surprised that I wasn't more sort of like impressed by graphics throughout the demo. I felt like I was, I just played the Demon Souls remake a couple months ago, and I felt like it surprised me and impressed me more than Final Fantasy 16 did. I thought Final Fantasy 16, like I thought the environments, I thought the lighting, I thought all of that would be like, I don't know, maybe my expectations were too high, but the icon battles, like it is still early.
I think when we get to one of those cities with the crystal mountains,
Sure, yeah.
that's going to be like the
Yeah.
open jaw moment.
Yeah. I could see that. I've seen somebody compare shots of like Final Fantasy VII Remake to Final Fantasy 16, and like obviously like the actual fidelity of the graphics is higher, but there was like there was a lot of clutter, there was a lot of like objects in the environment, there was a lot of like it just, there's something that felt a little, maybe it was just a castle environment, just felt a little sterile to me. I don't know. But anyway, my point is like once you get into those combat situations, like that's where the game really sings. The animations are so good. The like just the use of particle effects and lighting and combat and the icon battles were just like, it was just impressive stuff. It just looks so good. And like that's when it felt next gen to me, when I was in combat or when I was fighting Ifrit near the end. I was like, okay, this is why, they talked in the like the pre-release marketing so much about like this game had to be on PS5, it couldn't be cross-platform, and the seamlessness, like the lack of load times, and then the spectacle of those battles, I think kind of proved that this is like, this had to be done this way, with a focus on one platform, so that they could really lean into like leveraging every bit of technology that's in that platform.
I thought the hedge trimming was funny in the castle when they're using like magic to trim the hedges.
Oh yeah,
using the slaves too, right?
The bearers. Yeah.
I also thought I wish the goblins were less ugly. Oh my god, they're so ugly.
They were pretty ugly.
I hope that those icon fights are interesting, because I reckon there'll be a few, and when it comes to games randomly changing up the gameplay for mandatory segments, sometimes that can be not very fun when you have to try and get through it. So,
well, I'm pretty sure the one I remember is like Ifrit running up like the arm of Alexander or something like that. Yeah. Like there was a pretty wild looking one.
There's one I remember, Ifrit or Titan or somebody like dragging Garuda through the ground, like, slamming her head into the ground and dragging her. Apparently, like they will all sort of take on different, like different styles of gameplay as well. One is sort of like styled after a wrestling match. One is like this Phoenix and Ifrit one was like, Panzer Dragoon, like a rail shooter. So I'll be interested to see how that gameplay changes each time you kind of encounter or control a new icon. I think each one will have its own style of gameplay, and I think that's what will be needed to kind of shake it up and keep it feeling fresh.
Well, it'll be interesting too. I've heard some rumblings about Ifrit turning into Diablos by the end of the game, because he's the dark icon of fire.
That's interesting. Yeah, so, like sort of the opposite of Phoenix.
Yeah, so all of a sudden exactly. Like you'll have like, so Ifrit will like grow the wings, and all of a sudden like whether they name them, I don't know if he'll be renamed or whatever, but I feel like there might be this like devil.
I mean, like you even have like Joshua with his blonde hair and Clive with his dark hair, right?
Yeah.
So like that symbology, like not that that's a very healthy way of defining, good and bad, but that is sort of like, pretty obvious use of, visual differences between the two brothers that might kind of lead into that idea.
Yeah, we already went into it, but it'll be interesting to see, like how much personality there is of the icons, because I said before, it seems like Ifrit had something against Phoenix.
Ifrit had a personal vendetta or beef with Phoenix for whatever reason.
Well, like Clive had everything taken from him, right? Like Joshua became the dominant, and like we all saw how his mom treated Clive after that, right? And so like that, that would fuel that sort of like, that vengeance that Ifrit was showing. I going back to the Ifrit and the Phoenix fight, like was that not the Gandalf and Balrog fight from Lord of the Rings? Like the whole visual of like it opens with that fight, and they're like plummeting. It looks like they're plummeting down the pit. They're fighting, and then it even goes to the wide shot where they like fall into the large cavern and they're just slowly falling. I was like, this is like, is this intentionally Lord of the Rings? I'm not too big on the Game of Thrones references and the taking that style, but like give me a Lord of the Rings inspired Final Fantasy, and I'm all over it.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I actually saw somebody like mix in the footage together, so there it was like showing, kind of mixing it up on this like Twitter video. So it was kind of funny.
I'll have to go find that. That's perfect. I couldn't believe it when I watched it. I was like, this is so on the nose. It has to be intentional.
Yeah.
But because, like, you know, earlier I was complaining about 22-year-old kids not caring about Game of Thrones, but they definitely care about 21-year-old fantasy movies.
Not to defend his mother, but I can't imagine going through pregnancy and childbirth in like medieval type times, and then your kid doesn't inherit the thing he's supposed to, so you have to go for a second. Just
It'd
like
be curious.
That's probably that experience of just like making a child is probably bad enough that's she's so mad.
Maybe we'll find out that's not really his birth mother.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
That'd be wild. Find out his real birth mother like died during childbirth or something, and the Duke remarried, and Joshua was her kid or something, and that's where I don't know.
I really do I feel like this cast is going to reveal itself over time. Like, I feel like there's enough depth to the characters as we've seen them so far that like we will get to know them at that level. Like, whether or not she, you know, turns out to be his mother or, you know, isn't or any of that. Like, I feel like there's that opportunity, and the game is going to do that. It's going to dive into like, you know, not just Clive, but also who are these other people? Why are they the way that they are? And how do, you know, how do their choices and their conflicts impact what's going on? I think that the world is rich enough in that way. And I think like the Final Fantasy XIV story, it does such a good job of integrating the stories and the lives of its secondary characters, just by nature of not having an active protagonist, right? Like the Hero of Light in 14, like it's you, but like you're kind of an avatar for, you know, this larger group of people. And I hope that they can bring that forward and create a story that's kind of carried on the backs of lots of characters rather than just one.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting pretty long now. Probably a good time to wrap things up. But did anyone have any final thoughts that they wanted to add in before we wrap it up?
I just want to go to sleep until next Thursday.
I just want to wake up.
Yeah.
No, you got to be careful. You're going to be like Cartman freezing himself with the game console, then going so far in the future that you can't use the console.
Yeah. Oh yes, I don't want to do that.
I'm already dreading. So I pre-ordered the physical copy of the game, and it's coming in the mail, and I'm gonna lose it if it doesn't come the right day. Actually, I wasn't thinking to. So I had it. It's being delivered to my work because I figured that's where I'll be at, like during the day when they deliver it. And then I took the day off, and now it hit me the other day. It's like I'm not gonna be at work to pick the damn game up.
No.
So now I gotta have to go. I have to get I had to slip a coworker a few bucks to let me know when it arrives, so I could zoom in and zoom out.
I always go and pick up, like if it's a game like Final Fantasy or Zelda, I always just go out. Like the Best Buy in my town lets me do like pickup, right? In-store pickup. So I can put in an order before the store opens. They'll grab one off the shelf, and then as soon as it opens, I can go pick it up. And that way I know I have it. I know it's not going to be sold out. I know I'm going to get it release day because
I get mine from the store.
I couldn't sit here.
I went the Best Buy route because I wanted the Steelbook. I got the not the full on collector's edition like Paige is getting with the statue. I got I got the one that just has the map and a Steelbook.
Nice. I'm excited.
Have to clean up the dining table.
Yeah.
My idea
that's
for the
a centerpiece for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm like, okay, where's that going? Middle of the dining table.
Yeah.
Someone needs to take the space tools off of it.
Either that, or you could build like some kind of like tower on top of your house so that the statue is like just looms over your entire home, and everyone that drives by can be like, this house is this is a Final Fantasy house.
Yeah. You could mount it to your dashboard in your car,
like the car hood,
dancing hula.
Whatever those are called, they get stolen.
No, definitely wouldn't get stolen.
I was gonna say, glue it to your hood so that it's like
that's the word.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I'm so excited for it. I like, after playing the demo, I was always excited for it, and I had the mind to go in. Like, it might not be the Final Fantasy that is made specifically for me, but I'm one of 10 million people that's going to buy this game, right? I'm even more excited after this demo, and I've been working on a few, pieces, features, and op-eds, just like driven by the experience of like playing this game that I just think is going to be really interesting to talk about over the next little bit. From, you know, combat being such an interesting kind of driver of like, you know, clips online. Like I think we're going to see a flood of cool combat clips from, you know, just all over social media, but also the way that it integrates like story elements and like stuff like active time lore being like a fabulous addition to the story. And the game, like I was worried that like, oh, they had to put in this active time lore, you know, the team was saying like, oh, even people on the development team can follow the story. So we created this feature. And like, that's what pulled down Final Fantasy 13 is like, it only told half its story and you had to go into the encyclopedias, in-game encyclopedias to know what was going on. But like, then you play the demo and it's like, oh no, this is telling a really compelling story. You have everything you need just in the main narrative, but active time lore just like adds on top of that. It can be a little refresher if you've been away from the game for a little while, or you want to know a little bit more about the context surrounding these. It's a layer on top of an already well-told story. And I think that's going to drive a lot of interesting conversation going forward about how, you know, games can tell stories in a way that's like deep and rich, you know, but also accessible for a larger audience. Cause that's such a clear goal with Final Fantasy 16. So I don't know. It's going to be cool. I hope we're talking about it for a long time. I hope it doesn't get lost, you know, under all the other big releases coming out right now.
I'm looking forward to the Sunhee Legend slow-mo action, ridiculous combos. I'm sure there'll be plenty.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll wrap this one up by mentioning that it's Father's Day in a few days. And Final Fantasy 16 comes out in a week. So what better way to kill two birds with one stone than picking up your book, Aidan, Fight Magic Items?
Yes, I can confirm as a father and as somebody who has read Fight Magic Items many times that it makes a fabulous Father's Day gift.
Yeah.
Anybody, you know, I think it's a book, and I wrote it in a way that, you know, it's for people who enjoy video games and enjoy stories about people who create and who play. It's a story about the people behind the games. And so, you know, if you're listening to an RPG podcast, you probably already like the genre. I think you'll find a lot to like there. But if you know somebody that just, you know, like is into video games and, you know, maybe played a Final Fantasy back in the day, it's also chock full of stories that are just about creativity and passion and drive and, you know, artistic pursuit. And I think that it, you know, I hope a lot of people like it. And I think a lot of people have been enjoying it for that reason. So yes, buy a copy for your dad, buy several copies for your dad. For Father's Day, he'll love it, and if he doesn't, he'll give it to a friend who will love it.
Yeah. I never tire hearing about Sakaguchi stories. So,
oh man, he's just full of quotes, and the people around him are hilarious because the way that they talk about him with like mad reverence, but also a little bit of fear. It's like, okay, yeah, like this guy's a character. You could write a whole book just about Sakaguchi.
Well, I've been loving lately, like with the whole Pixel remaster stuff. Like they've all been back together, right? So you got like Sakaguchi and Uematsu and Shibuya. They're all like tweeting and stuff and they're having fun together. So it's and then Sakaguchi had his Final Fantasy 14 run there, so
which was amazing. Like him recreating like, you know, scenes from his old Final Fantasy games in 14, and just to see that sort of love for what he's created and what it's become is like, you know, there's so many people I think that want to debate what makes a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy, and like, you know, can it be a Final Fantasy game if it's changed as much as it has? But like Sakaguchi wanted it to change, and he, you know, if he can sit there and enjoy an MMORPG that's like a mainline Final Fantasy game, you know, like what does that tell you about the series? It tells you that it can be anything. You know, it tells you that's, you know, like it can embrace change and evolution and explore new areas and still, you know, still be just as an important part of the overall series as anything else. And I'm excited to see how 16 kind of expands on that. And then where the series goes in the future, right? Like the next game is going to be different again. It's not going to be Final Fantasy 16 2. I mean, it might be, but like, you know, like it's going to go somewhere else. And that's exciting. And like, that's what Final Fantasy 16 or Final Fantasies have always been about.
Yeah, as long as I'm still in my 40s by the time the next one comes out. That's that's my hope and pray.
So yeah, that Final Fantasy 13 and 15 gap was that was rough.
It was brutal. At least we got Rebirth. Even when we're done with 16, we'll have Rebirth to look forward to. So.
Yeah. I was writing a piece about Final Fantasy 16, and I was like, yeah, like, it looks like we're finally going to have a mainline Final Fantasy game with a good story for the first time since 12. And I was like, oh yeah, how long ago did 12 come out? I Googled it and I was like 2006 or 2005. Like, it really has been a long time since we've had a mainline Final Fantasy game that, like, you're really compelled to find out more in the story, that's not broken because it, you have to go deep dive into in-game encyclopedias, or it just wasn't given to you because the game was just, rushed after 10 years of development. And so, like, that's a long time to wait. That's like, what, 15 years since, we've really had like a really truly good Final Fantasy story in a mainline game. It's exciting.
And Paige, any upcoming videos or pieces that you'd like to plug?
Nope.
No.
Just playing Zelda.
Yeah. I've been having fun watching on the Twitter. Yeah, I've been following the tweets. A lot of funny Zelda stuff. It'd be interesting to see. I think all Twitter's going to be soon is just Tears of the Kingdom and Final Fantasy 16 videos. For the next few months at least, I would imagine.
I'm here for it. Tears of the Kingdom videos make me feel so dumb. Like, people making like, it won't be long before people are making computers in that game, right? You know how people will make computers in Minecraft, like working computers.
Oh yeah.
And somebody's gonna make a computer in Tears of the Kingdom. Meanwhile, I'm in a shrine, like, trying to figure out how to stick two sticks together, and that's like, and I imagine, 16. There's gonna be some pretty crazy combat stuff, which will be fun. I'm here for it.
And I'll be still trying to figure out how to use the photo mode in 16.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe how much detailed was in that photo mode.
Yeah. I like photo mode a lot. I used a lot in Demon's Souls. I used a lot in Horizon, God of War, and stuff. But I don't know. I found that one was actually lacking in some features that I was kind of hoping for, that could kind of take it over the edge.
Maybe they'll update it.
Yeah. Just the ability to, like, remove NPCs, stuff like that.
You can remove Clive.
You can remove Clive. The funniest part is, like, at one point you control Joshua for about 2 minutes late in the demo. And if you go into photo mode, it's still like a Clive button.
Oh, that's funny.
They didn't change it for Joshua. Yeah. But yeah, like, I could see there. I hope there's even more robust photo mode coming down the line. I know some games like Demon's Souls as well would, like, even if you were playing in performance mode, if you go into photo mode, it would kick it into, like, the graphics mode, so you'd get, like, higher resolution, you'd get more, like, post-processing effects and stuff like that, because like, Final Fantasy 16 is beautiful, and people will be taking a lot of great shots with it, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up here. I hope everyone enjoyed the demo as much as we did, and we're looking forward to, I'm sure, numerous episodes on the game as it comes out and we get to play some more. I'm sure we'll have another Zelda episode upcoming as well in the near future. So I want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll see everyone out at the next Thirsty Mage. Bye for now.
Bye.